Welcome back. One of the most important decisions you're going to make as a business owner is how to pick your lawyer. Not only when to engage them, but who to engage. And I'm going to walk through a few guidelines on how to pick the right lawyer for you. The most important thing about getting a lawyer is to have one before you need one. Kind of like a bank where they won't give you anything if you really need it. Lawyers tend to be really busy and don't know you or your case when you really need the help. And so as a result, establishing a relationship with a general business attorney is probably going to be your best bet, so that when an issue does arise, they're familiar with you, they're familiar with your company, they're familiar with the situations that you've been in the past, and are far more likely to engage you going forward. Or, if not engage you, at least find you a good referral. When you're establishing the legal relationship, because of the attorney-client privilege and the work product doctrine, which we talked about earlier, the work product doctrine essentially protecting any of the information that the attorney prepares on your behalf from discovery by another side in the lawsuit, and the attorney-client privilege, meaning that any discussions you have between you and the attorney, with limited exceptions for criminal matters, are going to be treated as confidential and not discoverable. So as a result, the attorney you pick is going to be one of your closest confidants. They're not going to be able to share anything. You may be able to talk to your best friend, but that best friend may have to turn on you in court. Your attorney does not. And so your attorney is likely to be your closest business confidant and somebody who you should feel very comfortable with. I just touched on the attorney-client privilege and work product doctrine. Each one of these is centuries old and is generally protected in every legal setting. There's a few other privileges as well, like the spousal privilege, but on balance, one of the most powerful privileges is the attorney-client privilege. The ability of your attorney to give you legal advice and for you to be candid about the situation that you're in, and the attorney to be candid to advise you, is critically important. And so the courts have said the access to those conversations can't occur in front of a trial or as part of a discovery process. And we'll talk about discovery when we touch on evidence, which is a little bit later in the course. But essentially you have this privilege, and that privilege needs to be maintained. So if you talk to your attorney about something, you can't then share that with anybody else. If you do, you've essentially waived your privilege. So you want to make sure that what you talk about with your attorney stays between you and your attorney. Work product is, again, what it sounds like. When an attorney's preparing things like an opinion for you about whether something's legal or illegal, or whether you should do X or do Y, or whether there's issues around a certain product, for instance, where you feel like you might have liability, all that information is work product and isn't discoverable either. So anything that the attorney is preparing in preparation for or in anticipation of litigation or during litigation is work product and is also not discoverable. And so these are two privileges that you really want to make sure you maintain, which means you need to keep that confidential between you and the attorney. When you're dealing with your attorney, you need to be open, you need to be honest, and you need to be candid. It's similar to like when you walk in and you got to confess your sins to the priest, if that's your religious observance. It's similar here. Open, honest, and candid. The attorney can help you best when they know everything that they need to know, and maybe some things that they don't need to know, in order to be able to give you proper legal advice. So don't be afraid of being open, honest, and candid with your attorney. It's required to get the best outcome. The other piece that you need to remember is to listen to the attorney, discuss the issues, and engage the questions. A lot of times we get defensive when we're talking to our attorneys because they'll be pointing out things that we either have done wrong or that we're thinking wrong. And we need to listen to that because the attorney's got no interest other than our best interest at stake. And as a result, they're going to potentially challenge some of your beliefs. They're going to potentially challenge some of the things that you'd like to see happen. And you need to listen carefully and then discuss the whys with the attorney. You have every right to understand why the attorney's thinking the way that they're thinking. You have every reason to question and ask questions and make sure you fully understand and engage and ask, is it an exception if, this occurs, or is it an exception because of that? Because the attorney is, again, relying on two things, relying on prior case history and statutes to develop the legal opinion as to what to do. And each exception, each change, each difference in the fact pattern between what you're experiencing and what was experienced by someone else or what the statute says may provide them with the information that they need in order to be able to help you more effectively. And so feel free to discuss and ask questions and fully engage in conversation with the attorney so that they understand what the situation is and how best to help. As I had mentioned a couple minutes ago, the best time to find an attorney is before you need one. And so as you're getting ready to start up and you go through that laundry list of things that you need to be probably engaging an attorney on that we discussed earlier in the course, there's always a question of, okay, so how do I find the right attorney? And there's a few key elements to this. It's like finding any other professional that you need to keep in mind. The first one is look for referrals from other business people, especially business people who are successful and business people you trust. If you can find a good referral from someone else who's a business person, who's dealt with an attorney on a business level, whether it's as their attorney or in opposition, and that business person is pretty successful with a significant amount of track record, that's probably would go to the top of my list of folks to talk to when I'm looking to hire an attorney. You may have a friend of yours who's a lawyer who may not practice business law. They may be a family practitioner, they may be personal injury, but they may have folks that they've dealt with either in practice or in their firm or by knowledge and reputation that would make a good attorney. And they also may know you well enough that they may be able to help identify an attorney that will sync up with your personality and business type. So referrals from other lawyers are always useful, particularly lawyers who may have had an opportunity to work with those business attorneys in the past. The next one is referrals from friends. Now, again, I put these in general order of preference based upon my experience. Friends tend not to understand a lot of the nuance between the various practices of law or the various areas of practice. And so they may refer somebody who they know because they're a great guy and you'd love them, but their predominant practice is probate law, and which is law for managing dead people's estates. And so you want to make sure you've got the right attorney. So referrals from friends are going to be helpful, and you should probably put them on the list, but do a little bit of homework ahead of time to try and identify whether that's going to be the right segment. You're looking probably for a general business attorney, and ideally one that has a little bit of experience in the industry vertical in which you operate. Another source of leads is the lawyer referral services. Local bar association may have one. National organizations, if you belong to a national organization for your particular trade or craft, they may have a referral service that will hook you up with attorneys. A lot of times the attorneys have a minimal vetting, generally that they need to go through in order to be put on the list. But you are getting more of a roulette wheel, crapshoot type of choice in comparison to the other three, where it knows both you and the attorney that they're referring you to. So lawyer referral services are useful if the top three don't necessarily work, because at least you've got some level of vetting and they may be specialized in your trade or business. The last one is the famous Google search. Interestingly, a lot of people use this as their first choice to go find an attorney. And while, again, you want a roulette wheel, and you never quite know what you're going to get. So I recommend that you start with referrals from other business folks, particularly successful business people with established legal relationships, then referrals from other lawyers who know you and the attorney that they're referring you to, then referrals from friends, then lawyer referral services, and last should be searching the web. So what should you expect at the first meeting? Going into the first meeting, there's a few things that you're going to want to do a little bit of research ahead on, and then also validate. The first one is know their experience, know the areas in which they have expertise and how long they've been practicing, where they've been practicing, where they're admitted. Generally, if they've handled cases or businesses similar to yours, are they specialized in your need area? So if you have a general business attorney and they're referring you to a specialist, so as you recall, there's going to be times when you run into one of those bad situations, like, for instance, a major regulatory issue. And you're going to want to go to your general business counsel, and go, I need a referral out to somebody who's a tax expert. And that's that a lawyer refers you to another lawyer, or a business person refers you to another lawyer. The specialization is going to be important if you have a complex but narrow situation or issue for them to work on. So, for instance, mergers and acquisitions tend to have specialized attorneys. Bankruptcy, specialized attorneys. Litigation can be a specialized attorney. Taxation, specialized attorney. So you may want to have somebody who's specialized if you've got a specific need. You're going to want to look for references. And again, sometimes they'll have references of positive outcomes on our website, or they may have a list of references, but they should have referenceable clients, and they should feel free giving those references to you so that you can reach out and talk to them. You're going to want to understand, coming out of that first meeting, what their fee structure is. So how do they bill? What do they expect the billing to look like? How frequently do they bill? Do they use different billing rates for different activities? Do they use paralegals, and how do they mitigate costs? Do they bill for additional expenses like Lexis and Westlaw, which are legal research, or are those included in their fee? So all of those are part of the fee structure. Sometimes attorneys bill on retainer, which is you pay up front and they hit the retainer for hours, so you essentially make a deposit and then they work their way against the deposit. Sometimes they bill in arrears, so they do the work and then they send you a bill. And sometimes they bill flat fee. So they'll do a business formation for $2,000. And so you're going to want to understand what their normal fee structure is. And potentially one of the most important pieces is your gut. When you're coming out of that first meeting, do you feel comfortable with the attorney that you've chosen? Do you feel like they're going to get you and represent you well? If you feel comfortable, that's going a long way to being able to be open, candid, and honest with your attorney. That's going a long way to making them the key advisor that you're looking for as part of your business. And then you're going to want to know and convey your expectations to the attorney. So know what you're expecting out of your attorney. Convey those expectations to the attorney, how you like to be communicated with, how frequently you want to be communicated with, when to bring you good news, when to bring you bad news. So you're going to want to be able to handle that at the first meeting. There's a few questions that you're going to want to ask the attorney. When you have a specific issue, the first thing I always ask is, okay, here's my issue. Attorney asks a bunch of questions, try and understand the issue. My first question is, okay, what are the steps necessary to handle this issue? What are you going to do? How long is it going to take? And again, attorneys will generally try not to pin themselves down to it's going to take a week, it's going to take 4 days, a lot of times it's going to be, well, it depends. Attorneys like to use the well, it depends answer. Ask them to give you ranges, ask them to give you timelines, ask them to give you various parameters around how long will it take and how much will it cost, which is another question that's coming. They're going to be able to give you some general parameters, and that should set a baseline or an expectation. And then it's their responsibility to come back, communicate with you in the way that you want to be communicated with, which you should have discussed as part of the first meeting, to reset those expectations if necessary. Another issue is, what are my alternatives? Normally, with a legal issue, there's multiple alternatives, including the alternative to do nothing. And the attorney should explain what those alternatives are and the pros and cons of each, their recommendation. But if they don't have any alternatives, then you may have an attorney who's not thinking about the big picture or not thinking holistically about the situation, that has a preconceived notion of how everything should be handled, in which case you may not get the best legal advice. So you should be looking for, what are my alternatives? What are the pros and cons of each alternatives? And then what's the expected outcome? What should I be expecting? Again, what you'll hear from attorneys a lot of times as well, juries are unpredictable, or I can't predict with certainty. Okay, tell me what you think the expected outcome is. What are the probabilities? Should I or should I not? Attorneys should be able to give you some general idea of the expected outcome without pinning themselves down. And again, they should be prepared to reset those expectations as additional information comes out as they go through the legal process. If you're working with attorneys, a lot of times they have paralegals, they may have associates, they may have other partners, they may have of counsel or specialized counsel that they bring in. So you should know who's going to work the case, who will be your primary point of contact, and how frequently will they be communicating. So you should know your legal team, and you should know everybody on it. Sometimes the attorneys will try and protect their associates or protect the paralegals and say, just deal with me, and that's fine. You should follow that advice and deal just with that attorney, because, again, that's going to keep your legal bills down, and it's also going to help manage the case more effectively for both sides. However, you should know who's going to work the case and who's going to do the predominant amount of work. You should also know, how are you going to be billed and what's the fee estimate? So not only how long will it take, but how much will it cost? And how am I going to be billed? Is it going to be a lump sum? Is it going to be contingency? Is it going to be by the hour? All that information is important, and you should feel free, and the attorney should expect you to ask these questions. You should ask, what is my role in the case? What do you need out of me? What do you need out of our organization? There may be discovery. There may be, your role in the case is to answer my questions, and I'm going to handle the bulk of everything. It may be, I'm going to need you for depositions. I'm going to need you for additional information. I'm going to need you to sit in on interviews with witnesses. You should have a fair understanding of what your role and the role of your business is in the case, and how you can best help get the right outcome that you're looking for. There's a few tricks to keeping fees down, and if you can follow these little tricks and tips, you're going to save yourself a ton of money on the legal side. The first one is, if you can do it yourself, do it yourself. And that may be filing simple supporting paperwork, that may be pulling information together, that may be making copies, that may be making telephone calls, that may be, if you can do it yourself, it's going to save you time. Attorneys will generally mark up, even for their legal assistants and paralegals, they may be marking up the salary 3 or 4 times before they bill it through to you. They have to, in order to be able to stay in business. So if you can do it yourself, do it. From my seat, one of the biggest things that you can do to help your attorney is to be really well organized. And this is not just at the time of the case, which is critical, but all throughout how your business runs. So be organized. Make sure everything has its place and that it's in its place. Keep your files well organized. Keep your computer files well organized. If something should be thrown away, throw it away. If something should be shredded, get it shredded. Retain what's critical to be retained, and make sure you can access it quickly. The more organized you are with your calendar, with your papers, with your time, the better it's going to be for you, the better it's going to be for the attorney, and the lower your fees are going to be. So speaking of calendar, is be on time. Your attorney may or may not be on time, but they shouldn't charge you for the time that they're not there. However, if you have a meeting at 11 and you don't get there till 11:15, you can guarantee that the attorney is charging you for those 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes begin to add up at $400 an hour. It's $100 that just cost you. So make sure you're on time. Be a little bit early, and run through the case with your attorney and make sure that as you have anything that comes up, whether that's a deposition, whether that's a phone call, whether that's a meeting, that you are on time. Be responsive to lawyer requests. A lot of times lawyers are on a strict deadline set by the judge or set by statute, and they need to get information in quickly. And as a result, you need to get the information to the lawyer quickly. That's part of the be organized component. Everything that the lawyer asks for, you need to be responsive to what the lawyer asks for, so give them what they need, and be quick about getting it to them. The more organized you are, the easier that is. If you end up with a delay, and the delay is caused by you, then the lawyer may need to go in and ask for additional time to the judge. You may lose the case summarily, and so as a result, your ability to be responsive is going to keep your fees lower. Be brief and direct. When an attorney asks you a question, answer the question directly. If you're not certain about what the answer should be, ask a clarifying question. Don't just ramble. Every minute you talk is costing you dollars. In some cases, it's costing you $10 a minute to talk to your attorney. So you want to be brief and direct. Prepare yourself ahead of time before the meeting. Have your questions written down. Work your way through them quickly. Make sure you're organized, and things will go well. And the next one on my list is get your checkup. We walk through the annual checkup for your business as being a best practice. If you get your checkup, your attorney is going to be really up to speed on how your business runs and what the major issues are and what your insurance looks like. And so as a result, it's going to take a lot of time out of what could be a very rushed and compressed timeline to begin with. So get your checkup, keep getting your checkup, and then when an issue does arise where you need to engage your attorney, they're going to be pretty familiar with you, with your case, and with your company, and it's going to make the fees on that case a lot lower. And if you know you need to get an attorney involved, get the lawyer involved sooner rather than later. They may be able to negotiate out a settlement. They may be able to identify a significant issue for you and help you avoid some landmines. The longer that you're in that danger zone of issues that we mentioned in the lecture on when do you need an attorney, if you're in that danger zone and you're trying to navigate it alone or without an attorney, every step you take could be a very bad one. And so get a lawyer involved sooner rather than later. If you know you're in a minefield, they're going to help you get your way through it. Finding the right lawyer is an absolutely critical step to success in your business legal environment.